All right, welcome Charlie and Lisa. How are you guys doing? Um, all right, you guys ready?
Yep.
All right, welcome everybody to Frank Analysis. I'm your host Franco. If you watched my previous upload on YouTube, I discussed how I reached out to the leadership of MPP so that they can address some concerns that were made by some of the ex-volunteers who came on my show. So we're going to discuss further some of the stories of people who are volunteering for MPP. They're going to bring their stories together. They're going to talk about what their role was in MPP, what they saw, and yeah, we're gonna also discuss like the things that happened after me reaching out to Nick Brana and Annalise and the Movement for a People's Party Twitter page and their email. So we'll begin with the new people who we have on. We have Joe Sheree who's returning, but let's go ahead and get started with Camilla Harris. Hi, how are you? Do you want to give an
Hello.
introduction of who you are and what your role was in MPP? And are you still a member?
Hello, everyone. My name is Camila Harris. I am from Inglewood, California, and I was actually several things in Movement for a People's Party. I was a volunteer, but I was also onboarded to be the Inglewood, California local hub coordinator, as well as I served in the Black Voter Circle as the official secretary. I was also in the Poor People's Circle for a People's Party. And I was also part of the organizing working group as well as the media and messaging working group, where I uh, helped with the social media as well as I onboarded new volunteers nationally to the Slack space in our organization. And I also was the official secretary for the Petitioners group in MPP. So I did a lot. I'm no longer in MPP. I was one of those who was purged from the organization.
And we also have Steve Coleman. How are you? What was your role, and how long were you a volunteer? What was your role as a volunteer, and are you still a member?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for having me. My name is Steve Coleman. I was the hub coordinator for the Philadelphia hub. I'm from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I was with MPP from around August until the very end of January of this year. After I signed the petition, I was also a moderator for the petition Discord that everybody's been talking about. And then I was still working with them up until I want to say probably the 23rd of January, trying to get things back on track before I stepped away on the 30th.
And we also have returning to the show Joe Sheree, who was the first ex-volunteer who I had on. Besides, long before that, months before that, I had on DJ Elf Seven. But then after that, following the fallout between Our Revolution Los Angeles and MPP, I had on Joe Sheree, as well as Renee Johnston. How are you doing, Joe?
Hey, I'm doing great.
So you
Thank you
wanna?
for letting me come back on.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you wanna remind everybody what your role was in MPP?
Yes, I was the People with Disabilities Political Outreach Lead, and I was also going to start volunteering to help people onboard into the political outreach working groups, as well as just I was the overall just present in every political outreach working group meeting that we had. So
Yeah. So before we
that's
get
kind of where it
started,
stopped. But
with like the
go ahead.
stories and everything, I do want to address some concerns that some people were having about my coverage on this topic. As I said, I reached out to leadership so they can get their perspective on. I think that what a journalist should do is first interview volunteers. That doesn't even have to be the first thing you do. Just as long as you get both sides, but especially the volunteers, because they're in a position where they're not getting as much publicity as the leadership. You got to hear from all sides, and I've been doing that. I've been giving people a voice who have not been on platforms. So I do want to ask you guys, how do you think my coverage was? Did it seem like it was biased at all?
No, actually, I think that your coverage has probably been the most fair that I've seen out of anybody's, especially when you compare it to like Lee Camp and Jackson Hinkle and stuff like that, where they are just completely ignoring the petitioners and want nothing to do with us. To see you actually come to us first and say, hey, here's a platform, tell your story, it's refreshing. I think it's really nice to see your coverage because it is fair and not biased.
Right. I also back up Steve here. For me it's been refreshing to see, the volunteer side, because oftentimes what happens with these kind of things with MPP is that our voices are not even in the equation. We're usually hearing from, Nick Brana, or we're hearing from someone else in leadership, but it's never from like our peers that we worked with every day, who are, normal working class Americans on average, who signed up to volunteer for this, movement or this organization. And it's been refreshing for me to see you actually include us, actually want to hear our voices, because I mean that's important. We're the ones who were the the labor, in a sense. I mean, we're talking about the Amazon workers, for example. We were the labor of MPP, and for people to say that our voices shouldn't be heard is just sad. It's just absurd.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of these people are supposed, they claim to be fighting for working class people, and they are on other issues. But when it comes to this, like a movement, it seems like I want to say like they may be attached to some of the people who they call friends, and they don't want to give them like the negative. They don't want to doubt them, but at the same, you have to be fair. You can't let that blind you. You can't let that misguide you from continuing to stand up for the working class person who's putting in their labor, like you said, Camila. Like you guys were putting in the labor for MPP. And a lot of these people call themselves socialists or democratic socialists. You're supposed to be standing up for the worker, right? So you have to uplift these people's voices and hear them out. If somebody is being ridiculous, then the truth will come out on that. But just like what we're seeing, I think the truth is coming out about the leadership in MPP. But let's start with let us know, like, what did you guys experience, like, since this is Camila and Steve's first time, like, what attracted you initially to MPP?
For me, I actually was in the Tulsi base. I was in Tulsi Gabbard's base. I actually served as a Tulsi online volunteer for her primary campaign. Excuse me. So those who have been saying things like, "Oh, this is just Bernie supporters or Bernie voters that were in MPP," technically that's incorrect. I was part of Tulsi's base and stuff. I mean, I support Bernie, but it's just I wasn't in that base when I came into MPP. I came out of Tulsi's base. So for me, I was like feeling a little politically homeless in a sense. Like I was determined to get out of the Democratic Party because I have voted Democrat since age 18. And the way that they have been rigging the primary elections was where, it was my done point of I need to be independent. I need to exit the Democratic Party. That was like my first step out. I learned about Movement for a People's Party through Ryan Knight. He's like the podcaster now with Amped Up. I knew him before, way before he did this podcast, so I know about his humble beginnings. But that's how I learned about MPP at first. And so, leading up to convention, I was like really hyped, and I'm like into Nina Turner. I've been a follower of Jimmy Dore. I was seeing people that I respected on the left that I actually followed their content and stuff like that, and was like hyped about becoming a part of this, hoping that it's legit and it's something that I can do work in, get out of my comfort zone and try. And so for me it was like brand new experience to organizing, brand new experience to helping to build a political party. And I was excited about that. So what happened to me was just unfortunate. But that's how I got in. Was I wanted to be a part of something that was different, and that hopefully I can bring to my community.
Yeah, for me, it was a very similar story. I had gotten involved with MPP because I was looking for somewhere to run as a candidate. I had run before in Delaware County, Pennsylvania for committee person and had won as a member of the Democratic Party. So I was involved for, I don't know, since like 2008, I guess, with the local Dems. And I started seeing how terrible it was and like how things were going. And I said, I need to do something different. If I want to get into local elections, if I want to get into local politics, I need to find somewhere that's going to accept me. And that's when I found MPP. I noticed that they didn't have anything set up in Pennsylvania, like in the Philadelphia area. And I thought that I could be the one to really get that started. I thought that I had enough of a, pedigree around here where I could get involved, start up something, and then eventually run under the MPP banner. So I saw the convention, I listened to Nina Turner's speech, and it really sounded like something I wanted to be involved in. So I signed on the line and got involved right away.
Yeah, and Joe, remind us again, like what were the initial signs that you saw that made you feel more wary about MPP? Like what was wrong with like the organization, like the structure? What was it for you where you started to see like the first signs? Okay. It sounds like Joe's mic is off.
Who wants to?
Hello, Joe? Okay, we'll get back to Joe, but Camila, when did you first start seeing signs where you started feeling more wary about MPP?
I think for me, it was when I came back from helping to care for my stepdad. It was I went away throughout the month of October to tend to my stepdad, who was in and out of the hospital. He was suffering from some pre-existing conditions, including COPD, and those things were like flaring up to where he was going in and out of the hospital and landed in a nursing home. And so I had to go away from MPP for the entire month of October. So when I came back into MPP and the Slack workspace and all that stuff, everything seemed different from before I had left. I noticed there were less volunteers on the Slack for some reason. I noticed that there was turnover in my working groups and my circles as far as leadership. And for example, in the media and messaging working group where, we deal with social media, we deal with press media, things like that. There was turnover in my circles. I was in the Twitter circle. I had a different leader from before. I was in the Facebook circle. I had a different leader from before. So things had happened during the month of October that was obviously, troublesome, that I didn't experience prior to that. And that was shocking to me because I was like, well, I thought we were kind of on the up and up. People were starting to meet, things were starting to, get into place and things. And then all of a sudden it was just a different, not only just a different structurally, but it was just a different vibe. Like it wasn't as nice. It wasn't as hyped. It wasn't as optimistic. And I didn't know what was going on. So this was prior to me even being circulated me even knowing that a petition existed. Like, let me just say that. Like there was turnover of volunteers before the petition. There was turnover of leaders within the organization before the petition. So I guess it was just one of those things. Like when I came back, I just knew something was different, but I didn't know exactly what it was until I got the petition, and I was like, "Holy smokes!" I didn't suspect, that there were systemic issues going on with MPP. But that's how I learned.
Yeah, Joe, sorry, your mic wasn't connecting last time, but do you want to go ahead and can you relate to any of the concerns that Camila was seeing, like when she was first seeing signs of the disorganization within MPP?
Well, yeah, when I asked for accommodations for ASL and closed captioning, that was such a hard ask. And I did put it to Phil in a hour meeting that we had. I said, well, you can't fit with a local college to find an ASL translator or somebody who is willing to do captioning for the meetings. And then I started to get pushback from Thomas Royko, who is the IT guy. And he to do any of this stuff that needed to be done. And I had a private meeting with him and we talked, and I thought we were, pretty good. I thought we had talked about everything that we needed to talk about. We talked about Otter.ai, which is a live transcription aggregate for Zoom that they did actually start implementing on the second or first national call of the year. And, and I did give Thomas props for that in the Slack chat, in our Slack. And I said, well, thanks Thomas for making this available. And he was going to go ahead and make the transcripts available on the website. And he said, the website's going to get redone and we're going to make these transcripts available for people who have disabilities, who need screen readers, hard of hearing, deaf, whatever. I was like, okay, great. And so the other things were just the organizational stuff, the administrative stuff, like organizing documents. I had to do everything from scratch on getting my circle up and running. And, I had one of the fastest growing political outreach circles within MPP. My circle had grown to be 41 members, and we were, I thought, going pretty strong. And then I get a message, well, actually, we all get a message saying that we need to stop focusing on policy and focus on outreach. And I'm like, wait a minute, why can't we walk and chew gum at the same time?
Yeah.
We need to be focusing on policy and outreach at the same time. You cannot have one without the other, especially if you're approaching your city council people, your board of education people, your water district people, even these smaller level offices, they're going to want to know policy. What are you thinking about with policy? How's that going to fit into what we're doing here? So that one was a huge red flag for me, because I got involved with MPP because I wanted to affect policy that impacted people with disabilities like my son. And that was one of the reasons why I was doing the law enforcement project that Camila and Steve know that I had been asking for help on that. And what that law enforcement project was looking at was how law enforcement people are trained to deal with people with disabilities when they arrive at the scene of a call. And, that was brought about by, because, like my son who is disabled, he has a speech impairment. And then there was a 15-year-old autistic boy who was shot 15 times last year. And, because the police officers didn't know how to respond to somebody with autism. So those were the catalysts behind me doing that. And so I was just like, so I've got this really major project that's going to be policy heavy. And then all of a sudden I can't be focusing on that policy anymore. So, and after that, everything that we started to see with the petition group as a collective, I started seeing. And somebody actually brought this to my attention while I was really actively growing my circle. And I was just like, okay, out of solidarity, I'm going to sign this. And then I did. And so here I am.
Mhm. Yeah. So Steve, did you go through like something similar as Camila and Joe?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to rehash it too much, but basically it was the same types of things that I was seeing as well. One of the big problems for my circle, specifically being in Philadelphia, was the lack of direction that we were getting from the top. To have, 2, 3 meetings in a row where people are coming to me and saying, hey, we want to do action, we want to do this, we want to do that, and getting told from people above me in MPP leadership that, we have to hold off. You have to get approval before you do this. You have to get approval before you do that. And it was always wait until after the election. Wait until, Phil gets back from vacation. Wait. Always told to wait. And it was just like always happening. And it didn't matter if it was for my local group, if it was for the science circle, the media messaging group. Every single group that you went to was the same story. The waiting game, and we'll see. And that's actually kind of like the whole thing with Annalise, where, they're saying like, oh, we were just telling them to wait. We're going to give you these things. You just have to wait. I've been waiting for over a year. How much longer am I supposed to wait type of thing?
Yeah.
So those were the problems that I was seeing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just want to remind people here, if you have not noticed here, the 3 people who I have here with me right now are from 3 different parts of the country. Camila is over at the West Coast. Steve is in Pennsylvania, and Joe is in the South. Correct? You guys have not met each other prior to being an MPP, right?
No,
not even prior to the
Kansas.
petition. The petition was kind of like that unifier of people across the country that were having similar issues with leadership in Movement for a People's Party, in trying to work, because we all really came into the organization to work. We didn't come in to constantly have, meetings or be in holding patterns or have our concerns, being, tossed aside for whatever the leadership's desires were. We came in to work. We came in to actually help build a major new party. And, a lot of us were handcuffed. A lot of us were pigeonholed. A lot of us were left hanging and neglected in trying to do that work. And I said in my introduction, I was in various parts of the organization, including the Petitioners group. So it wasn't just I was just disgruntled and being in the Petitioners group. I was still doing work while we were still negotiating this petition. I was still working for MPP.
So a criticism that someone might say is, why didn't you guys just stay longer to try to fix the party and try to make it more organized?
Yeah, if I could handle that one.
Yeah.
We did. We stuck around as long as we could. I personally stuck around until January 23rd. January 23rd was the last email communication that I sent out. Now, you have to remember, we had been starting since November. We went all the way through. At that point, I had been purged from the MPP Slack. Renee had been purged. The Black Voters Group had been purged. All of these things were happening, and I still was willing to work with them. I reached out to Phil. I reached out to Nick. I reached out to all of these people trying to get time set up so the first week of February, we could get back to work and try to salvage this thing. But it wasn't until all of a sudden they go online and start, disparaging the petitioners and saying this, that, and the other about us, that all of a sudden it was like, well, what am I going to wait for anymore? If they are going to come out publicly and say this about me and the rest of us, I'm just going to go all in. Another thing that people had always said is, why didn't you make the petition public before? What were you waiting for? The reason we never made it public was because the national coordinators from MPP requested us not to. Mm-hmm. We could have gone public with this in November or December.
Wow.
But because we wanted to work with them, because we didn't want to embarrass them and hurt the movement by having all of these people say, oh, wow, MPPs having problems already, we kept it quiet. It wasn't until they made it public that any of this went down.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a privacy agreement between the petitioners group and the Nick Brana and the National Coordinator Circle, which is also called the NCC. They are the leadership body that makes executive decisions in MPP. And there was a privacy agreement between the two groups to not have the petition be public on Slack or in the media. And so everything changed when someone made it public on the Slack workspace and violated that agreement. And then everything pretty much spiraled after that as far as negotiations between the two sides. So it wasn't like we've tried. And I know a lot of people have said, well, how come you guys haven't really tried to, negotiate with the leadership? We've tried. And we've been dismissed by the leadership in various ways. Even like in the middle of negotiations, the leadership decided to sideswipe us by basically installing a mediator instead of being the two sides working, face to face. And we actually abided by that. We said we'll go ahead with that. If you're not comfortable actually going from group to group and meeting, we can deal with your mediator that you choose. So we had representatives from our side that also dealt with their mediator, but it took a while, like weeks, to get them to come back to the table as group to group. And then the other side of this was when we presented the petition, there was an ask of the leadership to give us a written response. Now, you and I know, Franco, a written response is like a formal document that goes point by point in response to the points in the petition. Well, at one point, they decided to do a little Slack post and put it up there and then tell us that was the written response to our petition. I was like, no. I understand professionalism. I've volunteered in organizations and I've also worked for employers. When there's a written response to something, that is a formal document. It is not a social media post. It's not an online post in some channel on a workspace. It is an actual document. And they didn't give us that until a month later from when we presented the petition. In fact, they rolled out Maine. This is where their priorities were. They rolled out Maine, which, to be honest, people don't even understand that that's not a total ballot access that they got in Maine and that they got in Colorado. What happened is they got step one done of getting ballot access. So everything with, having to file with the secretaries of state and all that, and they're able to, present themselves as an option, that's what they got done. It's step one. There are other steps to getting on the ballot, and as Renee comes on, she can talk about New York, but there are other steps that has to happen in order to have full-blown ballot access, meaning you can have candidates on a ballot to run as, say, People's Party, And so there's a lot of misinformation that have been circulating, out in media, out from the MPP leadership about ballot access and if they got states versus not. Like with the state of California, a lot of us were purged from MPP as leaders. Remember, I was the Inglewood, California local hub coordinator. My regional coordinator was forced to resign. One of my state coordinators was forced to resign. And one of my state coordinators was the one who actually helped draft the petition that we actually initially gave to the leadership. And so, how they got, quote unquote, got California was they went to our Secretary of State. They had their lawyer stuff, everything together. They went to Sacramento, filed paperwork, and then became like an option that you had to drop down and input the name and all that kind of stuff in order to, quote, be part of the People's Party as far as your registration. But there is no like group of, like a state party in California.
Yeah. I just want to reiterate this for people because there's some people in the chat that are calling me an MPP hater. Okay, I wanted MPP to succeed. I still want them to succeed, but seeing all these signs, seeing how much disorganization there is and the mistreatment that they're doing to the volunteers, it has to be addressed if it's going to improve, right? And you're already getting that perspective from leadership from all these other channels, but they're not bringing on volunteers. And so who's being biased here? How am I being biased? I reached out to leadership and they didn't want to come on, and I get the sense that they don't want to address some of these concerns that these people are raising, people who worked hard for them. They don't want to address those concerns. They don't want me to be asking them those questions. That's the sense that I get. If they have nothing to hide, then they would be here. They would be on this show. But it seems like they're only comfortable with going on shows that are going to be propping these people up who are friends with them, right?
Exactly.
So like, how am I being biased here? I even said, if you are in MPP right now, if you're a volunteer in MPP, you're invited on the show so you can tell your story and talk about how you're happy with the way that things are going within MPP. And even Jackson, when he was here, he said that he'd be happy to see a panel with Nick Brana and you guys, so that amends could be made and so that we can get some consistency with the stories here. Because we're not going to get consistency by only listening to one person.
Hinkle isn't Hinkle isn't going to do that. I know that's your buddy, and I know y'all are friends, and I can appreciate it. And I won't talk bad about him. He's a kid. Which is what I realized. I'll talk bad. I'm old enough to be Jackson Hinkle's mother, so I try my best to not give him too much of a hard time. But the reality is, even while he was on with you and claiming that no one had reached out to him, I DM'd him while he was on your show, watched him read my DM, and he never responded to it. So he's not interested in getting the full story. He wants to keep going along with the story that he has. He's perfectly content to go along with that and to, make the statements like, oh, well, if that's really true, then that's not okay. But if he would answer my DMs or read any messages that I tagged him on, he would know that what I'm saying is true, because I don't write anything without receipts. I tag you on a bunch of stuff, Franco, and I send it to you. I have never sent you one thing where I make a statement and I don't have a screenshot or a video to back up what I'm saying. Yeah. And there's a reason for that. I'm not going to put information out there that's incorrect. And I don't ever want to be called out to say like, oh, well, she's just saying stuff. So I only write what I can verify with a receipt. And if people aren't interested in reading the receipts, if they're okay, that same Discord chat, they've got one receipt that they have used over and over and over again with multiple reasons, multiple things that one screenshot is supposed to prove. But meanwhile, me with my 20 videos and my 50 screenshots, that's not valid information.
And that's how it should be. When you're making a claim, you have to back it up with receipts. You have to back it up with evidence. They're out here saying, then they're calling you guys infiltrators. Well, I have yet to see evidence of that. If they can come on my show and I can ask them, where's the evidence that there's infiltrators? They have to present that. They can't just make that claim. And these bigger channels can't just be buying into that claim just because these people are their friends and they want MPP to succeed via wishful thinking. I understand the hope. I understand the desperation of taking down the duopoly, but let's stick to reality and let's not live in illusions. Go ahead, Steve. It sounds like you want to say something.
I want to put it out all on the table right now because Jackson Hinkle's full of shit. He is absolutely 100% full of shit. He's read my DMs too. Renee, you see the check mark too. He's read my DMs. He's seen how many times I've tagged him. Lee Camp, your girlfriend has seen what I've said. She's DM'd me and said, hey, how come you redact people's information? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? People don't want to accept the fact. People are so tied up with this idea that we're going to kill the duopoly and we're going to save the world and this, that, and the other, that they're blinding themselves. They don't want to accept the fact that Nick Brana, Lee Camp, the rest of the advisory council people that are in charge only care about money and themselves. They don't want to see people like me and you succeed. If they wanted people like me to succeed, they would be helping with my campaign. But instead of helping me with my campaign for state house, I'm told by Nick Brana that we don't want to focus locally. I'm told by Nick Brana that we need to focus on winning seats with former Democrats who have run before at the national level. I'm told that local elections are not how we're going to make a change in this country. Does that sound like a people's party to you? Does it really, really get through your head that you think you're going to change anything if you can't even focus on the local level? And then for them to have the audacity to call me a liar and to call me an infiltrator and to ignore the things that I say and provide proof for, to show proof of racism in your Slack, Nick, to show proof of people saying to me directly that you are a class traitor, that you are a race traitor, because you don't think that white people should be able to say the N-word. For me to get banned from your Slack for telling people you cannot say that word, and then for the person who said it to get a national platform on their next call while I am kicked out without a word edgewise, that's a people's party? That's what we're believing in right now? Yeah, it's not the Dems, it's not the Republicans, it's way, way worse. It is the Nick Brana cult.
Yeah. I was about to say something, but I forgot.
Can I add something really quick
go
on
ahead.
that note? Because, like, personally, I came into the movement for a People's Party also to be a part of something that would be, going towards ending the duopoly. Like, I've said this several times, outspoken on Slack. Like, I'm not here for the clout chasing. I'm not here for, Nick Brana and his vision of a major new party, which I've heard people in leadership say, like, actual quote, I dedicated the last 3 years of my life to realizing Nick Brana's vision of a major new party. I'm like, no, I'm here, one, for the people. Two, I'm here to help end the duopoly that has been, monopolizing our government and monopolizing our elections for over 150 years. I'm here because of the work that I want to do in my community specifically and in my state to, bring about the kind of change that we always talk about on the left in all different social media platforms. And for an organization to be counter to that, in actually experiencing it and finding that out as their truth has been disheartening. It's been hurtful. It's been traumatic. And I'm not out here for me. I don't have a brand. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not trying to be an operative. I'm not trying to bring people back to the Democratic Party. I can't stand the Democratic Party. I can't stand the Clintons. I can't stand, all these other people that have been keeping us down. Mm-hmm. So no, I wasn't in MPP to make people go anywhere. I was literally defending MPP, and you've seen this from me before too, Franco, because you've seen me on Twitter.
Yeah.
I was actually defending MPP. I defended MPP was forced to vote when organizationally we didn't even know about it until the public knew about it. So even internally, where you would think, oh, if we're abiding by NDAs or those disclosure agreements, or we're tied to these different things to where we can't leak anything, and you are scared to share to us, who has to do the amplifying work of this particular campaign that you have in coalition with Jimmy Dore. You're scared to tell us about that before it becomes public. But when Jimmy Dore is sitting on his show and sitting there with Cornel West, Dr. Cornel West, talking about, oh, we're on the advisory council and we're doing this force to vote thing. I'm sitting in a meeting, like, about, in a media messaging meeting, hearing this while everyone else is hearing this. So I couldn't even do any amplification. We didn't even have any actions to promote. If it wasn't for Jackson Hinkle coming up with the protest, it wouldn't have been any actions with MPP. And MPP was one of the people who coalitioned with Jimmy Dore to do this whole campaign. All they did with Force to Vote was drop the petition website where they was collecting signatures, and on the side collecting emails for their database so they can prop up a fake number about membership. And they also was doing social media. Jimmy Dore was doing everything else. He did the town halls, and then Jackson Hinkle came along and did, the protest. And then Breonna Joy Gray came along and did her slack and started doing some organizing and stuff separate from MPP. But the complaint that I got when I was defending MPP was, well, MPP is not doing anything, so we have to do something. And January 3rd is the vote in the Congress.
Yeah.
So MPP was even slacking on force the vote, which is supposed to be about Medicare for all.
And I do want to say that even like, and Jackson knows this, MPP was trying to, and I'm not the only one that says this because I'm in group chats with other people, other content creators, but we knew because of what Jackson told us that MPP was trying to make force to vote their thing, but it was Jackson who started it. So some of the other content creators who I'm not going to name here, but I'm close to them, they were saying, and it seems like MPP is really trying to hijack force to vote. What big event have they done? Like, I'm seeing somebody in the chat right now saying they just started. They've been around since 2016, since Bernie Sanders dropped out. Like, they should have. Yeah, they should have had a foundation at this point. They should take advantage of the anger that the country is facing right now and turning the country upside down and uniting people from all fronts. Like they should have a team of activists and not people who are retired activists like Medea Benjamin, who, they just call up for like some meetings every now and then. They should be organizing events and like multiple events, like general strikes. They were about to have a general strike and then that died down. But yeah, they've been around for a long time. And let me know if you guys want to add on to anything else that I just said.
Yeah, they've been around since 2016 through 2017. They were initially called Draft Bernie.
Yeah.
They were like trying to recruit Bernie Sanders to be to run independent for his next go round of elections or whatever. And that's what they were at first. Then they weren't successful in getting Bernie Sanders to be an independent candidate for president or whatever. So MPP evolved out of that, including I think it was Burn the DNC, also had merged themselves into MPP, what ultimately became MPP, and then ORLA, Our Revolution Los Angeles, did some merging with MPP, and then that from there is where they kind of had a base of volunteers. And then within 3 weeks is when they made that People's Convention happen. The planning, getting the different people that Nick Brana had ties to come on and speak about the need for a major new party and how MPP is in the work of trying to get to that. So if it wasn't for that convention that happened, you wouldn't see me sitting here. You wouldn't see Renee sitting here. You probably wouldn't see Joe or Steve sitting here at all. And it was 3 weeks that they made that event go from idea to it happening virtually and having all the success that they did with that convention. And so what happened after the convention is that they weren't prepared for that aftermath. They weren't prepared for the people who had interest in the organization. They weren't prepared for the construct of bringing those people in, having them onboarded, having them filtered to different areas, the different circles, the different working groups. They wasn't prepared for all the internal customer service that they had to give and all the training that they had to give in order to make it be a well-oiled machine by the end of 2020. They also wasn't prepared for the type of people that were coming into the organization, like myself and like my peers here, like real workers, like people who wanted this organization to work. We had some hopes hung on this organization to work because we all have backgrounds in leadership. Yeah. We all have backgrounds in volunteering in some shape, way, or form, whether it's for Bernie or for Tulsi or for Marianne Williamson or whomever on the left. We have backgrounds in this. This is not like we're a bunch of newbies in a sense. The only thing that we are new to is building a political party. That's the only thing that we're really new to. And so all this misinformation out there about, we're just a bunch of disgruntled newbie volunteers that was only like 2 weeks. No, I was there for at least 6 months. Same for Steve. And then there were people who were, and everyone else here And then there were people who were there from the very beginning, that 2016, 2017 cycle, that also has stories like ours.
Yeah.
That had,
yeah.
Of mistreatment, of being dismissed, of having struggles and challenges in doing work.
Yeah.
Because there was all this personality warring, if you will, going on, or clout chasing going on.
Yeah.
In the group.
I have heard of that. There's people that have known Nick Brano for a lot of years, and a lot of people who come out from working with him come out not trusting him and saying that he's really inept. I do want to read this Super Ray. I don't want to let this go away. It says it's by Rock Finsar. It says MPP is over. There are many good people who are associated with MPP, such as Jimmy Dore and Justin Jackson, who I believe are honest actors and can leave the group. By the way, the solution to this is more direct action, not more sheepdogging into the Democratic Party. Yeah, and I said that in the video, like, just because this won't work out doesn't mean that we have to go back to the Democratic Party. Not at all. It means more public organizing, and that the answer is not always electoral politics, and third parties involve electoral politics. Okay, we can reform the system via public organizing. So you, Renee, I want to ask this question to you first, since we were talking about this before the live stream. I do want to ask your perspective on this. We were talking about how, Nick Brano is good at public relations. He's good at reaching out to people with platforms. And it feels like that's where his heart may be, like being around those people. I get that sense from Annalise also, like she wants to, maybe subconscious, like it may be her survivorship that's driving her to clout chase subconsciously. I don't know what else to call it, but she might be doing it subconsciously to protect herself so that she can have her platform. And I see that she has a channel. What are your thoughts on that? Are they consciously doing this, or are they just acting out selfishly in a subconscious way?
So I'm gonna say that it's selfish, because I've had, and I told you this the last time I was on.
Yeah.
I've had conversations with Nick. So it's not like, I'm a person who only chatted with him randomly on Slack. I spent hours on the phone with Nick talking about the problems, the concerns, why the plan needed to be adjusted, my concerns with how they were in this grand pursuit of like national ballot access and a presidential campaign in 2024 without local organizing. So what I think, and this is just based on the fact that his plan is not a good one and he doesn't care to listen to any good plans, is that he's really out to just become popular enough that when this doesn't work, he can do something else with whatever popularity he gains from going through this process, because he doesn't need the third party to be successful to become a person who is seen as a voice or as someone who has knowledge of how the political system works. He just needs to say he tried, and the duopoly broke it apart, and that it's the duopoly why it failed. But in the end, and I've talked to a number of people now after the fact, in the aftermath of all of this, who know Nick, and I can't get any verification that he's an expert in any of this, that he's an expert in organizing, that he's an expert in politics. Like, even from what I understand, and I was like shocked, and I'm still, I maybe shouldn't say this out loud because I haven't seen any verification of it, but, according to the Bernie Sanders website, he wasn't the director of political outreach. He was an intern. According to the people who were with him for Draft Bernie, he presented this idea that he could get to Bernie Sanders, and Bernie Sanders ignored him, probably because he was an intern. So, I'm not seeing any evidence that he actually knows what he's doing, but he knows enough to put forth this face as if he knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
And that is enough for him to get on people's shows, to be on Soledad's show, to be on Jimmy Dore, to be on Lee Camp, to be on all these, like, you know, I guess they're relatively popular, you know, leftist shows to say, you know, I'm doing this great thing. And it doesn't have to work for him to get what he wants out of it. He just has to say he tried and he tried to do it, and that's it. And he'll be able to go be a pundit and, you know, be on MSNBC or whatever it is that he thinks is like,
or just,
you know, just like
succeeding
goal.
or just succeeding with Patreons or whatever. But right, I'm here. Because, I'm not going to forget. I'm not going to forget the complaints that I got from the volunteers who were working with Nick. I'm not going to forget about the stories that I heard from people who knew Nick from working with him before. Steve Poikonen is not going to forget. All the, like, this is getting out here now. So eventually, when you're just mainly in it for clout chasing, when you're mainly in it for yourself, it's going to backfire. Okay? And that's what I'm saying here. Like, it's backfiring. I don't think that Annalise was thinking about how her blocking me was going to backfire. I thought because she's used to doing it to her volunteers, and then they don't have a platform where they can speak out about it. But she did it to the wrong person. Okay, right. And I was I was polite to her, right? Was I not being?
No, you were. And I tried to tell you, they're not coming on this show because the one thing they are not going to do is sit with someone who's going to ask them legitimate questions and put in front of them the receipts that say, okay, you're saying that race didn't have anything to do with it, but here's the screenshot of the person claiming that they can use an N-word pass from your Slack channel. And that person spoke on the next volunteer call, but the 4 Black people who were arguing with them and the white person who was arguing with them all got booted. So they're not going to have that conversation because they don't want to have that conversation. They want to have the conversation where they can keep talking about infiltrators in the Democratic Party and that we were trying to break MPP. You know, I joined late because I was trying to get dinner on the table for my family. This was my time for my New York meetings. Our New York Hub meetings, literally, I'd be making dinner while I'm on the Zoom with the New York Hub, trying to make sure that we were planning things. If I wanted to break MPP up, why would I waste my time every week putting that type of energy in, adding people from the national Slack, making sure the boot camp was updated? Like, I spent so much time and energy trying to put some effort forth and trying to keep people engaged because we didn't have a plan. Yeah. We didn't have direction. We were kind of just floating by the seat of our pants trying to figure out like what exactly we were supposed to be doing. And as I told you the last time, when we asked, they didn't have any answers. They still don't have any answers. They still don't have a plan for how they're going to get ballot access in New York because they don't have it together. They started in 2017. How do you not understand how ballot access works across the country? It's been 3.5 years. Like, it took me a month to figure it out. Like, it doesn't take that long. It takes dedication and energy and a desire to actually do the work, not just to be known for doing the work, but to actually do the work. And it's the same thing with Annalise. My opinion on her, they offered her a seat on the advisory council and she took it. And she bailed on the petition people so that she could be on the advisory council and so she could try and, make her go with her podcast. Yeah, I wish her luck.
And Nick Brana told...
Can I inject about Annalise too? Because I'm from California. I'm actually from Los Angeles County. Our Revolution LA was like a known left organization here in Los Angeles County. They were like growing leaps and bounds. Like everyone knew about them on the ground. I was even considering also joining them, not just being a part of MPP, but joining them. But then I was told from leadership to hold off on joining ORLA. And, there was some things shaking up. Now, I had no idea that this had anything to do with Annalise Garcia. So, so everything was like a surprise to me, like, about holding up on me joining, because they was like, well, it's kind of like not safe to join at this point. And it was because of that turmoil between the petitioners group and ORLA and ORLA trying to figure out if they should keep their partnership with MPP because of those systemic issues that were going on, and they were finding out about mistreatment of volunteers happening. So the leadership that Annalise Garcia was on in ORLA, they were actually having side conversations about whether or not to stay, with MPP, but they wanted to see what the petition process was going to pan out to be. And so that's a whole different wing of the story. Now, with Annalise Garcia herself, I think she had some run-ins with some people on her board, because there were some people on her board that were also in MPP as actual volunteers, because Annalise Garcia, from my understanding, wasn't even an actual volunteer. Well, at least no one that I personally onboarded. Maybe, people like Jerry Perez, who was also interviewed by the Vanguard guys podcast.
Yeah.
Maybe he onboarded her, but I know personally, like within the work that I did for in the organizing working group with new volunteers and stuff, I never onboarded the woman. I never even personally talked to her, but she has been that kind of person that's been on flight mode for me, because one thing I do is I tell the truth. And Annalise Garcia, and hate to break this down for folks with what Jackson Hinkle keeps on promoting as Annalise Garcia was a leader of the Petitioners group. I was the official secretary of the Petitioners group, and all the people who were on the Petitioners Discord and everything can vouch for that, because I was actually doing notes during our negotiations. I actually did minutes, and I know who exactly was at all of those meetings and who wasn't. The person who was not was Annalise Garcia. She had left whatever her role was. I know it wasn't a leader. There were other people that were on the ORLA board that were, like a facilitator like Steve or something like that on there. But Annalise Garcia was never in the leadership of the Petitioners group. So let's make that record straight. Sorry, Jackson Hinkle. She was not a leader on the Petitioners group at any time of the existence of the Petitioners group. Okay. And, with me, I was literally elected. Steve was elected to his position. Renee held positions in the Petitioners group as well. We were all elected, and there was no elections involving Annalise Garcia. There's no record of that whatsoever. So that particular claim can be out of the minds of folks out in the, universe, whoever's listening to this. Throw that out. Debunk it, because it's not true. Yeah. Okay, so when ORLA decided to break off, it was after everything had came out on Slack. That privacy agreement we spoke of earlier was breached at that point. And so ORLA had decided to meet up and basically say, well, what do we do now? Because it just seems like there's no forward movement with negotiations as far as reform of MPP. Like there's just, nothing there. Things have been breached. Both groups are in their corners. It's nothing happening anymore. And so we need to make a decision about our partnership with this group. And they came to a decision and wrote out their statement. And so that's how that happened. Now, the statement that MPP came back with was where all the lies came out from, and they try to peddle Annalise Garcia's story and her little statement and stuff like that. All that stuff is their drama to what ORLA did. That was their response to what ORLA did. It's like, well, let's just stir the pot and see, if we can get the public to side more with us about what ORLA did, because there's not too many people nationally that know about ORLA, but people in Los Angeles, where I'm from, know about ORLA. And so, and it was, I think, also right after they announced that they got California. So it wasn't too long, I think, after that, if I'm not mistaken, where they made that announcement of getting that access done without having a state party. Remember, I was in that group where we actually was trying to form a California MPP. So that was, most of us were either purged, who were in California MPP, or they were forced to resign. And so technically there is no California MPP, but my media and messaging working group has someone being on the on Twitter behind a webpage or two. I think there's about 3 California MPPs out there, actually, accounts, doing some ghost work, as I call it, to save face for MPP.
Yeah, go ahead, Steve and Joe, if you guys want to add anything on.
No, I mean, I think that pretty much everything that Camilla said is how I feel about the whole thing. Annalise is somebody who was not very involved. And this is as a moderator of the Discord group, somebody who saw how little she actually did participate in things, who did see, how soon after she joined that she did leave the conversation that was being had. One thing that they like to talk about on these other shows is that, the Discord was a horrible place where all they were doing is shit talking MPP and making death threats against Nick and all of this, that, and the third. But what they're not seeing was the other subcategories where people were working on their own bylaws, where we had each state and what it would take to get on the ballot in those states, where we had all of these little subcategories for the things that we wanted MPP to do that we worked on ourselves just to have work going because there was no work to do. So it's a bullshit lie for them to say that we weren't doing work in Discord, for them to say that all we were doing was sitting around talking crap about people, because that's not what it ever was and not what it is to this day. There are still people today who are doing work. There are still people who signed the petition today who are in MPP, who are trying to fix it from within. So, I just wish that everybody would kind of take a step back and really think about it. Like, what's more likely that Nick Brana and him and his celebrity friends want their little club to succeed, so they're willing to say and do anything to keep that image that they've crafted? Or is it more likely that all of us are full of shit and that we're lying? Like, you have people from all over the country on this call right now: New York, Kansas, California, Philadelphia. Is it more likely that all of us got together and we're like, you know what? Let's just take down MPP, screw it, and just concocted the story? Or is it more likely that they're feeling the fire, realizing they're wrong, and they're trying to silence us?
Yeah. They can't be like again. Let me reiterate this for the audience. I respect a lot of Lee Camp's work. Over time, I'm discovering that there's more that I disagree with him on than I agree with him on, but that's another story. But you can't be saying just saying they wanted to take down the party from the start. There's just people there from the start. Like, what? Who have you talked to? Where'd you get that evidence from? In order to say that, and the only evidence that they use, which Renee was alluding to, was that tweet by Joe Sheree, right? The conversation that she had with somebody else.
Yeah, so that was actually from the Discord.
From the Discord.
Now, you have to remember, too, that one screenshot that's completely out of context was weeks after people had already been removed. There was no more negotiations by that point. The people who were discussing weren't even a part of this anymore. We may have said the things that they say, like, this is the greatest thing that could happen to us.
Steve, seriously, I have no qualms. I spoke to Ryan Knight. I had a long conversation with him about what my experience was, why I got booted, what happened. The thing that they were certain to cut off was me saying that they're definitely going to call me an infiltrator again because I talked to Ryan Knight. But Ryan Knight's a grown man, and all I did was speak the truth, is basically what my statement said. And I reposted it, the actual statement that I made, somewhere in my Twitter feed. But they were careful to not show that part because they don't want anyone to recognize, because they're still telling the story about, well, he's a socialist and he wanted MPP to be more about socialism. They don't want anyone to know that Ryan Knight had conversations with people who signed the petitions. So, and again, I'm not saying that we were the impetus and that we were the thing that pushed him over the edge, but he had conversations and he was not happy with how the petition signers were treated. He was not happy with how the Black voters were treated. He was not happy with how Camila was treated. He was not happy because it was very clear that there were issues going on that were being ignored. So he made the decision that he made. He's a grown man, but I made the statement. I spoke to him. I don't, all I did was speak the truth, but they're certainly going to call me an infiltrator now that I've spoken the truth to other people. And then what precedes, what follows that is the screenshot that's been shared. And listen, I'll talk to Cornel West if he lets me. I'll talk to Susan Sarandon if she lets me. You know why? Because people should know the truth. And I posted this today on my Twitter feed. If you have a voice that's being listened to, or a feed that's being followed, and you are using that to just continue with this story about MPP without listening to what people like me, like Camila, like Steve, like Joe, like Lisa, what we have to say about what our experiences were within that organization, then you are perpetuating a fraud, because you should at least speak with knowledge of what's happening. But if you're Lee Camp, you're Jackson Hinkle, you're all these people who are just ignoring what's happening and continuing to speak about MPP as if they're a real thing, then, I have no respect for that. Because if you hear my story and you choose to support, that's on you. You're welcome to do that. Everybody's grown, everybody's free, everybody can do whatever they want to do. But you do it with the knowledge. Don't do it perpetuating this nonsense and this fraud about infiltrators and all. Nick, the last words Nick said to me before I said, no, I'm not coming back, was, I really hope you return and work more with us. So how am I an infiltrator if the last thing you told me was to come back?
Go ahead, Joe. I'm sorry.
Joe, could you repeat that? Your mic was cut off a little bit.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm.
Hopefully she comes back.
But to finish my thought that I was going to say is, we may have
sorry,
said
Joe.
those things.
Yeah, your mic cut off. We'll cut back to you. Go ahead,
yeah.
Steve.
To finish my thought, we may have said those things, but anything that we said in that screenshot was for a reason. It was all because of their actions. None of it was ever, let's do this to destroy MPP. It was always, let's do this to make things better from the start.
Yeah, we were about reform. We honestly was about reforms in MPP, so where the leadership was functionally, sound. They were actually operating and being helpful and, supporting the work of, me and my peers here and, all the others who were actual leaders and organizers, and managers or whatever inside of MPP. We wanted MPP to work. That's what people need to understand. We wanted MPP to work. So when we put up the petition, it was basically for them to understand as a leadership, these issues are what people in your organization, your volunteers, your organizers, your different managers of different working groups were experiencing. And we need you to work on them, to have a sense of urgency in working on these matters. That was one of the things that I was very outspoken about on the Slack workspace, was the lack of sense of urgency from our leadership to get things, tackled that needed to be tackled, to have answers to questions, to get people the help. Like Renee was working on New York, one of the biggest, states when it comes to, electoral politics in this country. California, is another one. I mean, we're known as the ones who tend to have the most delegates, in a state, if you're talking about any kind of party. Like, we're one of the bigger states that, we have to have California in order to win the country. It's the same thing with New York. It's the same thing with Pennsylvania. I mean, 2020, perfect example, election we just came from. They were, critical to have. So if you're a third party or trying to be a third party like MPP, you will want to be centric to the volunteers. You will want to be centric to the people in the People's Party. not to, the celebrity left club, as I call them, and until, we see signs of that you actually care about the people and the issues, the policies. Like I said, they pretty much, with Force to Vote, they breadcrumb that, and then they remove themselves. It ended up being more about, Jimmy Dore, his crusade. It was more about, the new Force to Vote for M4A, their crusade. It went away from MPP into other groups doing the actual work because they care about Medicare for all. They didn't tokenize Medicare for all. And that's another thing with MPP leadership. They tokenized a lot of our policies on the left. Me and Renee were in the Black voter circle. And in our Black voter circle, we were about the Black issues, or issues that face Black Americans, such as ourselves. And they told us, no, basically, you're supposed to be about going to get Black people to be in MPP. It was kind of like a quota directive, go get the Blacks and bring them in to MPP. And it's like, no, we actually want to do policy work because there are major issues like Black Lives Matter with, ending cop immunity and all that stuff. There's matters that are tied into greater matters like, Medicare for all impacts Black people. Having something like that will impact Black people more than it will impact other demographics. So that we had a lot of different issues with our leadership, not only not caring about us as volunteers and our experience and as organizers in our experience, but also those policies that we always are on Twitter or on Facebook or wherever talking about. They breadcrumb those, they future fake those, they don't have any actions, original actions. They piggyback off of everybody else's actions. Like they piggybacked off of Jackson Hinkle's protests, but they didn't really care about Medicare for all substantively.
I was just gonna say they should have been the first ones to organize that, but instead they were trying to hijack it from Jackson Hinkle. Yeah, but sorry, go ahead and continue.
Yeah, well, I say that too. Hijack it from Jackson Hinkle as far as his actions, because he was the one who stepped up and decided to do a protest. MPP could have did something across the country, not just in DC. I commend Jackson Hinkle for coming up with something at least for DC. But it could have been an across the country thing, just like what they 100%. Did for the Amazon workers for Alabama. It could have been something like that. But they didn't, but that's not their care point. That's not their priority in Movement for a People's Party. The Movement for a People's Party is about a fan club.
Yeah.
That's how they're also, cultic. It's about a fan club. It's about how many eyeballs get on their content, how many followers they get, how many emails they get in their database. Subscribers to their channels, things like that. It's not about the substance of what the left is about and about the third parties. In fact, Carol Earl, who is their PR person, said, and I quote on a national call, "Do not call us a third party. Consider us an option for a major new party." So they don't even consider themselves a third party. But of course, now you're starting to see that trickle into some of that stuff, their stuff, because of this kind of stuff, where we're questioning your stuff. I mean, even the platform that's on their website is a variation of Bernie Sanders' 2016 campaign platform. They do not have an original platform at all. And so everyone roaming around like, oh, well, they only been around for a little bit of time. No, they've been around for a little bit of time, and they've been centric to celebrity and to cultism and to tokenism and to pro-censorship, because they want my voice, Renee's voice, Steve's voice, and Joe's voice to go away.
And that's mine too, because I was blocked, and they don't want to come on my show.
Right.
Anybody who exposes them.
Bring this away, or I want to just do something to where they have to mute themselves. That's what they're about. They're pro-censorship. And even with our experiences, Renee can also attest to this, we've experienced them being anti-Black. We've experienced racism from them. And I've been outspoken on like about different things, and they've had to come to my defense sometimes, or they felt they've had to come to my defense because I was the one getting brutalized and attacked from people on talking about a systemic issue, for example, like just about transparency. Like, where's the transparency, or where's the sense of urgency, or where's the democracy in MPP? Like, I was saying things like that, and I was getting trolled. I was getting, well, why you got to be public on the general channel about that? I'm like, because it's an issue and it involves all volunteers, and all volunteers need to know. I'm not going to be in a back door having a conversation with anyone about something that everyone needs to know about, and every voice needs to be, included on responding to.
Yeah. So do you see any similarities here with what I'm about to say? Obviously, MPP, they say they want to end the duopoly. And then we hear, people like AOC and the Justice Democrats saying that they want to reform the Democratic Party so that we can have more progressive policies. Like, obviously there is a difference there in what they say. And we're seeing that AOC and the Justice Democrats and the squad, that they are, we all agree here that they're sellouts, and they care more about their careers than about actually getting progressive policies passed and shaking the boat. But I'm seeing a lot of people who have hope in taking down the duopoly still defending MPP and still hero worshiping. Just like there's still people that have their hopes on AOC and the squad. They hero worship those politicians, and some of those people still hero worship Cenk Uygur and everybody else at the Young Turks and Sam Cedar. Are you seeing, or do you think that a lot of these people that are still defending MPP, some of which, and you really got to ask yourself, have you been inside of MPP? Have you experienced the way that MPP is organized? Are you guys seeing the same kind of hero worshiping here, but they've transitioned that hero worshiping from progressives like Bernie Sanders and AOC to people like Nick Brana and the Movement for a People's Party, and people who are supporting Movement for a People's Party like Jimmy Dore, which I will reiterate, he doesn't know exactly what's going on here. At least he hasn't dove deep enough. But are you guys seeing the similarities here with the hero worshiping?
Yeah, definitely. I think that MPP is DNC light. I think that a big part of it is that people are just so fed up and so hurt by the electoral politics that we do have to deal with, that this finally seemed like it was the way. And it's a really big shot to the gut to find out that they're all full of shit still. But I think that's what it is. People just don't want to accept the facts, so they're holding on to what they can.
Yeah, and we're working class people. Like, we're not like corporatists or anything like that. Like, we're all trying to be in something to make a difference, to make a positive change and stuff like that. And it has been sad seeing like the Justice Democrats and the squad, disappoint us so much, because we were all hyped when they got elected. We were all like hopeful, like, yes, they'll get in there and they'll fight. They won't be, lapdogs to Nancy Pelosi or, Chuck Schumer or, Clyburn or any of those people. Like, they would actually be in there stomping their feet and for the issues that we care about, that we talk about all the time on all these platforms, and it's been constantly like disappointing, to see them kind of backpedal a little bit. It's like they'll say that they're for something, and it becomes all the Twitter buzz, for example. But when it comes to that policy piece and them literally getting stuff on the floor, they have a bunch of excuses. Well, it's more difficult than y'all realize and stuff like that. But it's like, we thought y'all knew the answer, which is why you ran and you got elected and you got in there, and you've been in there since 2018, for example. We thought you've done the work to kind of figure it out so that you can get stuff to the floor, like Medicare for all, the $15 minimum wage, or as is now growing into $25 minimum wage, because $15, like Nina said, is the minimum. That's that bare minimum we have. But it's, you know, those things that we care about. Even the UBI issue, you know, you got all Democrats now. How are you not stomping the horn and being behind the bully pulpit about $2,000, you know, ideally monthly for UBI? But $2,000 nonetheless. I mean, that's how we got the United States Senate to be all Democrat, right? Was the state of Georgia had their runoffs, and they actually campaigned on that to get us $2,000, not $1,400. You know, not 2,000 minus 600. You know, all that kind of, you know, stuff they try to peddle out like that's relief. No, we wanted the $2,000 you promised. Okay. Every single penny. So, yeah, like I think we're just all tired of being disappointed. And then for us to get into MPP and experience what we did, that was another major disappointment.
Yeah.
And I want to say that, you know, the Democratic Party and MPP are both leaving people with disabilities in the dust. Nobody is bringing up the fact that of the sub-minimum wage for people that are disabled in the $15 an hour minimum wage conversation. Nobody. I have been hammering it on Twitter. Every time I see a conversation that an elected official is having, I'm saying, okay, you need to include people with disabilities in this conversation too, because it don't matter if the minimum wage is $15 an hour for Camilla, Renee, Steve, you, me. A disabled person is going to walk into a Burger King and ask for a job, and they're going to get paid $7.25 or $2.50 an hour. No, they deserve the same wage, even though they are doing less work, but are at work for the same amount of time. They still deserve a livable wage. And the sub-minimum wage needs to be included in that. There's also another epidemic that people are not looking at, and that is the intellectual and developmental disability community. Both parties and the Republican Party, MPP, the Republicans, the Democrats, they're all ignoring this aspect of America as well. And I had hoped that the home and community-based supports would have made it into mainstream conversation, and it has not. We need universal home and community-based support standards for states to adopt. IEP is getting neglected here in Kansas, severely neglected. And I've sent you stuff in DMs, Franco, about that, and we're going to have conversations later on that. But the platform on MPP says, that they are against disabled workers being paid a sub-minimum wage. Okay, I didn't see them come out and say any of that on when they were talking about the fight for 15. I have not seen them once come out about home and community-based sports. Both issues were issues that I brought up when I came into MPP. And so, and then they want to say that I wasn't doing work and that I wasn't doing this and that and everything else. Hello, I am the sole caregiver to a now adult son with cerebral palsy. And I am doing everything I can anywhere to make an impact for him and for others like him. And that was the reason I came into MPP, because I wanted to have another avenue, another seat at the table for people like my son and for him. And so, if I wanted the kind of abuse that I was getting from MPP, I could go back to my son's father. you know, because the stuff that they were pulling with me at the end was just about the same extent. And the fact that I had to find out that that screenshot with me and Harley, I think I said his name right, had been shared with Susan Sarandon. I had to find that out on the Vanguard. I just accidentally clicked on that, and I thought I was gonna, well, I'll watch it. So I did, and I had to find out through that broadcast that that screenshot was shared with Susan Sarandon. And I would love to have an audience with her and say, hey, this is exactly what that conversation was about. No way, size, shape, or form were we having any malicious intent towards you or Cornell West. And on the world. And now the celebrity left, as Camila has affectionately called him, now thinks that I'm some crackpot in I mean, even the Democratic Party here in Kansas doesn't treat. I mean, I'm very well respected in the Democratic Party here in my state. At least I think I am. They still let me have roles within the party, so you know, I'm here. So I just think it's a bunch of hooey. Yeah. But I don't even get to defend myself. This is the only way I've been able to defend myself, is being able to come on your show twice now, and to help defend the other people that have come up on this show with you. And I will always stand in solidarity with the people that I signed the petition with, always.
Yeah, go ahead, Renee.
So you have a couple of people in the chat, and I've learned, right? Because this is on Zoom, so I figured out how to make sure I can watch the chat while the conversation is going. And it's important for people to understand that the real core reason why MPP is going to have a problem is because they are trying to work from a national, top-down, hierarchical method and process with something that simply cannot work that way. You cannot create a national party starting at the top with 9 people talking on Zoom and making all the decisions. So if you decide that you're going to work a party doing it that way, it cannot succeed. You have to start at the base level. So Christian's there. I remember Christian. He's a good person. He's from Oregon. He's working his ass off. He really wants this to work. And it could work in Oregon as long as they don't fall prey to all the nonsense that's going on at the national level. As long as they deal with the state stuff and they organize within their state to make things happen. The problem is going to be, if people in Oregon start to ask too many questions, they're going to start to get booted out. And then they're going to have a problem, because this is what happened in New York. We had decided we're just going to move forward, and we're going to go on, and we're going to organize locally. We're going to start bringing in other groups to see what kind of actions we can get involved in. We literally just had that conversation on Monday night, and I woke up on Wednesday and had been removed from all access. So what I implore people to understand is that they can do the work and they can try their best, but at any time, the national circle and the coordinators at the top can stand together on a Zoom call and decide that you're not even worth a minute to communicate with before they throw you out and remove all of your access to things. And that's what the problem is. So when things like that are happening, it's a problem. When you can't ask questions, it's a problem. There's a young lady who was also in the Black voter circle, who did not sign the petition, who was not involved in anything with the new organization. And she was told that her questions were too similar to the questions that the petition signers asked. And she was booted. Like, this is not how you make an organization work. You can't just remove people because they're asking questions. And what I said to Nick was, if someone comes in February and they're asking the same questions that people were asking in November, that's a problem with MPP. That means that you all are not doing something right. That means that you're not organizing, you're not answering questions, you're not scheduling things. Like, people are saying, oh, well, you know, what's the big deal? Maybe this wasn't their priority. Bylaws are not a priority. I've never been a part of an organization that's a nonprofit that doesn't have bylaws. Transparency with your financial documents, that's not a priority. To be transparent, you got to go into the IRS and search and do all these things. I'm the trustee for a nonprofit here in New York that gives grants away. Do you know what we do? Every year when the 990 is available, I download it, I add it to the website. So when you go to the website, you click on a button and you can read everything that we've done that year. This is how you're transparent. You give information when people need to see that information so that they know what they're being involved in. It's okay to just be transparent. You're supposed to be for the people. Why wouldn't you want the people to know what they're involved in? Why would you not want them to have access to that information? Why would you want to throw people out because they're asking questions? Why would you want to allow a group of people to be arguing on your workspace about using the N-word? And I'm wrong? I'm the one who has a problem? I'm the one, what they call me again? I can't even remember now. I can't even remember. Whatever it was, and I was like, hold on a minute. I'm the problem because I don't want people telling me that they have an N-word pass. I'm the problem because people on leadership are calling out people like Camilla when they have nothing to do with the conversation and deciding that they're going to call her name out. I'm wrong because I'm trying to tell people, don't talk to Black women that way. Like, why am I the wrong? Right. So, you know, people have to make their own decisions. I'm not going to tell anybody that they have to leave MPP, that they have to walk away, but stay knowing what the reality of the situation is. Stay being clear that these are the things that happen. And if it happens to you, you can't say you didn't know. You went in eyes wide open. And that's why I didn't go back when they asked me to come back, because my theory, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. And I'm not going back to an organization that sat on a Zoom call at 3:00 in the morning and decided that all the month and hours and time that I put in was not worth a phone call when they all had my phone number. Nick had my phone number. Phil had my phone number. Regina had half the people on that call had my phone number when they decided that they were going to boot me out. So I'm not, that's not for me. Yeah. So people can do what they want. But I don't want to hear that I'm an infiltrator. I don't want to hear that I'm a liar. I'm suspect, all this nonsense from people who simply have to go to my Twitter feed and they can read all the receipts. You don't want to read the receipts? You want to keep the story going in your head that I'm the suspect one? Go for it. But when you ask the wrong question and you get booted out of MPP, you get booted out of the Slack, just know that you were warned.
Yeah. And it's not even isolated. Like, it happened to her. It happened to me. I mean, like, even with Ryan Knight, like with you, Franco, like, I knew you long before MPP. I knew you long before this podcast here. I knew Ryan Knight long before his podcast. I remember when you guys was talking about making your own platforms and, doing your thing. So I knew you way before this stuff. So for me personally, it's been sad to, like, even come to you or come to Ryan Knight and it's like, this is what happened to me. Guys who I consider at least my acquaintances, my friends on platforms, like, this happened to me. And I'm sad that I have to come to you guys with my story, because I don't want to put this on you guys. You guys have been supportive of MPP. you guys have been out, with your bullhorns about it. And, I, thought, coming in, like I could depend on that information and go into something knowing that these two people that I know who are backing it, are trustworthy to get me into something that's legit. It's just I found out firsthand that it's just not. It's not what they advertised. It's not what they promised. They're not what they claim to be.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something that I asked for. Like for real. It's just something that I just experienced. And I wouldn't put what we went through on anybody. So when you see me like social media protesting on Twitter, and all that stuff, it's me just sounding the alarm bells. Like, look, if you go into this thing, just like Renee said, if you go into this thing, have your eyes wide open. Do not have blinders on at all. Have standards for your volunteer experience. Have standards for your organizing experience. Don't let nobody treat you like crap. Don't let nobody treat you like you some little groupie in an organization, and they can, and you're trying to do work, and they leave you hanging and neglected and abandoned from the work you came in to do. Like, actually care about yourself when you go into these organizations. Your rights, your liberties.
And I'm sorry, Franco. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Camila. I gotta go put the little one.
Yeah.
I gotta get this little one to bed, and I promise we do a family TV time before he goes to sleep. So I gotta go.
Renee, thank you so much for coming on and keep continuing to share your story.
Anybody has questions, my Twitter, my DMs are open. I will not hesitate to answer questions. And listen, I don't know the future. MPP could turn it around a year from now. We could all be like, thank God they did something different. They listened.
Yeah.
But you have to go into it knowing the truth. And it's that simple. All right. Thank you for the time, Franco. I appreciate it.
Thank you for coming
on. Night, everybody.
Bye, Renee. Love you.
Good night, Renee.
I was just saying, don't have blinders on when you go into any of these organizations that are popping up. Because there's a lot of people who are trying to start something, from scratch that's never been done before, whether it's to build a movement type of organization or a major new party or a cause type group, maybe like the, Force to Vote for N4A is a brand new organization that started in December. And they're still trying to get their footing about, leadership and what's going on. Ask those questions. Like, I'm coming into this, I don't want to feel like I'm wasting my time, my efforts, my energy, my expertise, the things I want to contribute. I don't want to feel like all that is lost in the shuffle because you don't have your stuff together at the top. Everybody who comes in as a volunteer, as an organizer, as a manager type person, whether you want to do something within the organization to help it function, like being a working group or whatever, know your rights, know your standards, know what you're in it for, your why, why are you doing this? And keep that being the focus, because if your leadership is not matching that, that's an issue. That's the problem.
Yeah. And I will say, if you want to make it far, you can't just like repeating Jimmy Dore talking points will only get you so far, which is what the only thing I see with MPP is they just repeat the rhetoric that Jimmy Dore says on his show. But I mean, what is the reason for why people are attracted to Jimmy Dore? It's because he's speaking about, unique problems that are happening everywhere in the country. So you can't only, main focus shouldn't only be about, a third party, third party. Let's take down the duopoly. Like, that shouldn't be the only thing. You have to give people a reason for why they should join a third party, because everywhere in the country, people are facing unique situations for why they want a third party, for why they don't want. So how can people trust you if you don't even have policies like that are going to help people out in their unique situations from across the country? Joe was just talking about what's happening in Kansas. Why don't we have more representation from MPP over in Flint that's focusing on creating policies for dealing with that situation, with the water crisis, with with the workers' crisis that's happening in places like in California, like with Amazon, and in crises that are happening down south. Like you have to have localized organization and present policies like locally. Like you have to have policies ready. You have to also adopt election integrity policies, because the election integrity policies are going to be different from across the state. So you're going to have experts on that are going to deal with that. Otherwise, how are we going to trust in a third party succeeding, seeing as how much third parties are suppressed? And it's going to get even worse with HR 1, right? Where is the team of election integrity activists for MPP? How are we going to make sure that they win? It can't just, like, again, it can't just be, yeah, let's have a national third party, and let's just hope for people to join us. Think back to the primaries. What were the reasons for why some people were attracted to Bernie Sanders or Tulsi Gabbard or Andrew Yang, who are outsider candidates? It's because they had policies, right? Bernie Sanders had his Medicare for All policy. Tulsi Gabbard had so many policies with her OFF Act, with her Securing America's Election Act, with her No More Presidential Wars Act. Like, where is the foreign policy? Also, like, that's how you can attract more people. If you wake people up, oh my God, we're spending so much money on all these wars. Yeah, hell yeah, I'm going to support this third party. And they have all these policies ready to, like, solve these problems for our foreign policy. The No More Presidential Wars Act, or like something similar to that. Like, where is that?
They didn't even have like a foreign policy anything in MPP when we were in it. That was something that I was even surprised about as well, because of, like you said, those outsider kind of campaigns that focused on issues. I mean, the quote that I never forget from Tulsi Gabbard, because I was an online volunteer for Tulsi Gabbard, is that foreign policy is domestic policy. Mm-hmm. If you don't have a focus on foreign policy, then it's going to impact the domestic policy, like what happened in Syria. With the bombings over there, and stuff recently through the, Biden administration.
Yeah.
There's nothing coming out of something like MPP on that issue, except maybe a platitude.
A platitude on their website, and that's it, or a social media post. Like, come up with a policy that's going to solve the problem. Like, come on, how are we going to have trust in you? Like, it just, like you guys said, it just sounds like a fan club.
And Steve can attest to the piece about candidates and and the whole process of MPP candidates, because there was one guy that I thought was going to be an MPP candidate, and he dropped when he found out about our experiences with, MPP and stuff like that. So even candidates have to like decide what they want to do at this point, the ones that are in limbo, especially for 2022. But yeah, Steve has more insight on that. So if he...
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's something that I really do want to caution people if they are trying to get involved as a candidate and coming to MPP. They don't have an electoral strategy unless you are somebody who has name value, unless you are somebody that has tried before and lost, and you're going for a congressional race. There's no help that you're going to be getting from the main MPP leadership, at least. So that's that. But I got to wrap up, guys. I got to head off to work. So thank you so much for having me on the show.
Yeah.
The class trader has to get to work. So
thank you very much for being on, Steve, and sharing your experience with everybody.
Of course. And everybody, my DMs are open. Rich Steve on Twitter. RICHSTEVE. Just give me a follow and hit me up. Have a great night, everybody.
Have a great night.
Bye, Steve.
Good night, Steve. Thank you.
Yeah, so, I mean, MPP should be creating, like, a justice league of people who are smart in different areas, like someone who's smart with election integrity, like, and have also a team of lawyers, like somebody who's smart with the whistleblower movement, somebody who's smart with the anti-war movement, and people who can also present foreign policies, and then have it be anti-war. Somebody who's an expert on worker co-ops and unions. But I don't see that. I don't see like these intelligent policymakers in MPP. And
yeah, I think that's what we hoped We hoped inside MPP, we hoped that for the advisory council, but when we learned that the advisory council was just going to be made up of, people that Nick Brana has personal ties to, whether it's Mike McCorkle, he's like a lawyer, or I think he also, if I'm not mistaken, was also running for something in Colorado. But it's like people like that, like they're just tied to personally Nick Brana. None of us elected these people. Like democracy inside MPP is basically non-existent. And if it's existing, it's not existing how it's supposed to go. It's kind of like there was a lot of controversy with even the name People's Party. Like the ballot was basically People's Party and then a fill in the blank. So it was so there was a lot of a lot of conversations, a lot of escalated heated commentary about the process of even naming the party that MPP was going to be. So there's a lot of these like little what some people may call minutia points, but they're necessary things that has to be done right in order for people to trust the very thing that they're in. Because if it's just breadcrumbing or you're future faking something, like supposedly they're supposed to have a founding convention in the fall. Well, there's no committees on that. As far as I have been privy to, there's still no platform committees and subcommittees. So they're even behind on the 8-ball, and we're in March. So if they're having something in, let's say, September, there's a lot of these conversations about the platform, like reparations was another thing. People had charged conversations, heated conversations about why it's not on the platform or why there's no real stance on it. And MPP came back with a platitude of, well, we got many members that support reparations, but when it comes to the meat and potatoes of reparations, there's nothing there. Like they haven't consulted like Dr. Sandy Darity or someone else to kind of give insight to the members, because the membership is not even with that many Black people. We have a Black voter circle, and it was about like when I left, it was about 30 people, and so we're a minority within MPP, and so it's not really that many people in there. I mean, I'm sure there are people platitude wise that are like, let's do reparations.
Yeah.
But if you were to actually ask them about reparations, they wouldn't have a clue on how to have a conversation with a Black person, let's just say, for example, in MPP.
Yeah, and you have to have other people there too that can be like an outreach for the conservatives, because we saw that Tulsi Gabbard, she was for reparations, right? But she was still able to attract a lot of conservatives. So you have to have other experts on there that can attract some of those conservatives that will be understanding, like, or learn to be understanding about reparations, right? It could be, okay, there's some representation here for my interests, and especially if there's people that are representing me locally. So I feel comfortable joining MPP and supporting them. But again, it's not there.
Right, and like I said, like with our specific group, Black Voters Circle, in fact, we have a statement on our own statement on petitionmpp.com, specifically about our quote unquote Black experience within MPP. And I'm very open, as well as Renee and others in our Black Voter Circle, or that was in that grouping, who are also petitioners as well. In talking about, the Black experience as organizers and volunteers and stuff in a non-Black led workspace. I mean, in organization, because that's a whole different experience compared to how everybody else experiences MPP. There's our side of stuff too that people don't, might not, understand, but we experienced it. We went through it. So it wasn't just us as just regular volunteers and leaders, but as Black human beings in MPP, it was a different, dynamic and experience and space and everything for us that, and like Renee also alluded to, a number of us got removed. At least 7 of us that we can account for were removed that were Black from MPP.
So before we close off, I do want to bring up a story that Joe Sherray wanted to share. So there's something that's happening in Kansas, right, with the governor there. So You want to share with us like what's going on, Joe?
Well, I was doing I went down a rabbit hole the other day with the Kansas Legislative Research Department and some stuff about the budget. And I found out that the governor did not recommend that $21.98 million and some change go to agencies that help with employment services for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. She did not recommend that $16,842,875 go to agencies that help with reducing the IDD waiver wait list, in addition to another $3,180,900. Let me say that again: $3,180,095 for another reduction in the IDD, which is intellectual developmental disability waivers wait list. So that is $20,022,970 that of just the wait list reduction that the governor is not recommending go to agencies that help with IDD. And I'm sorry, but there are over 4,000 Kansans now with intellectual and developmental disabilities that are on at least an 8-year waiting list for home and community-based supports. Our family, once we are able to get back on the waiting list, is going to be one of those households. And I mean, this is not the first time that she's done these things. Last year, she froze a 5% increase to home and community-based support providers who provide services to the IDD community. That went into effect on July 1st of last year. So she is definitely no friend to the IDD community. And this needs to be brought to people's attention. This is a real crisis in Kansas. They have already said that the IDD population is going to be the hardest hit population during the pandemic. It's the hardest hit population during the pandemic in Kansas, our family included. So, I mean, I would really, really appreciate a lot of support on this, because this is unconscionable.
Yeah, everybody who's watching, I'm going to be sharing that article in the description. I'm going to retweet an article about it also on Twitter. Please spread the word about this. Share this information. More people need to know about this. Joe, Sheree, thank you very much for sharing that. Again, people, this will be in the description.
And Franco, can I say one more thing real quick?
Yeah.
And if you want to follow my story, and if anybody's on Twitter, I am at wildheart4VR, and I tweet a lot about disability issues.
Yeah, that's definitely something that should not be ignored. I mean, these are people that can't stand up for themselves and rely on people like us to be addressing things that need to be taken care of for them. Camila and Joe Sheree, thank you again for coming on. MPP, a third party that put the cart before the horse. You know, there really should have been a foundation about all this, but luckily, because we are seeing the tremendous amounts of error within this organization, we know what to do next time. Like we have, I guess, we brainstormed a lot with the problems here, and now the next time that a third party evolves, we can have a much stronger one, much stronger one. And I said it when I did my last upload video about MPP. It has to evolve from a coalescence of all these different movements. like the disabilities movement, the Black Lives Matter movement, the anti-war movement, the election integrity movement, the whistleblower movement, all these different movements coming together, coalescing for one goal, which is to take down the duopoly, which is really a monopoly. And so we can finally have a government that truly represents us. But again, we can't put the cart before the horse, and we can't get distracted with hero worshiping. It doesn't mean that some of these people that we consider heroes didn't do a lot of good things in the past. It means that we need to step up, and we can't be blinded by that and thinking that they can do all the work for us. They're not going to do, they can't do all the work for you. Okay, nobody's going to come save you other than yourself. So again, Camila and Joshua, is there any last words that you guys want to say?
Yes, thank you for having me, Franco. Like I said, I've known you for a long time. I've followed you for a long time. I'm so happy for you having this platform and really, being that truth to power, really being, that voice for us and allowing us on your platform to speak our stories, to speak our voices. It's so important. And even, with Joe, for the short time that I've known Joe, I've been like so amazed by her, so amazed by her work, her passion. We really do need more entities that deals with disabled persons on the left. So if you want to make up something to start that focuses on those issues, I'm sure Joe would back you up and would be a light as well. And if you want to follow me, it's Black Unicorn Rose, spelled BLK, and then the word unicorn and rose in all one for Twitter. And then on other platforms, it's the Homie K, like on Instagram, DAHOMIEK. And I'll be glad to engage with anyone and have discussions and champion for the left, because we need champions. Yeah.
And thank you as well. I want to piggyback off of Camila, saying thank you for giving us this platform and giving us a chance to come and clear our names on your show regularly. And also for allowing me to also use your platform to be a voice for the people with disabilities. If anybody out there has an issue with disabilities that they need to be amplified on social media, please feel free to hit me up on Twitter. Again, my Twitter handle is @wildheart4BR, and I'm also the same handle over on Instagram. And Camila is a fearless warrior, and it's really been a great experience working with her. Her and I are very passionate about making sure I's are dotted and T's are crossed when it comes to organizing. And so, she's a really awesome person. I'm glad that I've gotten to know her. And just keep fighting the good fight out there, people, because it's us against them.
And to everybody who listened up until now, thank you for taking the time to listen to these volunteers with an open mind. And I understand, like, for people who are still, feeling angry about hearing from people who feel upset with a Movement for a People's Party, or who are upset with me because I'm addressing these concerns. I understand the frustration of wanting MPP to succeed, of wanting to finally take down the duopoly so we can finally have a government that represents us. But it's important to be grounded and to be in touch with reality, and to not just stick with an illusion, stick with wishful thinking of what you want MPP to be. All right? You won't get anywhere. It's going to backfire if you're not addressing what's actually happening in reality. All right. And look, I love you guys. And we're going to keep fighting no matter what happens. I know it may sound like really disheartening to see what's happening with MPP, but we're all still here. And what you guys are witnessing is an online community that's growing. and it's going to keep growing, and it's going to translate to on the ground. And on the ground organizing is how we finally reform a system and reform society for the better, for the benefit of the people. All right, so with that, I'll leave you guys with that. Like this video, share this video. Make sure you follow me on Rockfin. The links to places where you can support this, support my work are in the description. YouTube has demonetized me, so the best way that you can support me is through Rockfin or these other outlets. Patreon is censoring people, so I'm not on Patreon anymore. But yeah, guys, thank you again. Thank you, Camila. Thank you, Joe. And also thank you to Steve and Renee for coming on as well. Stay informed, people.